and I thank you all for joining me today. I'm going to be discussing marine mammals. Since we are in this lovely bay, I do urge you, if you see like a seal or an otter or something, please don't be afraid to stop and shout it out and we can talk about it. Do you guys know what the dolphin said when it bumped into the whale?
What?
I didn't do it on purpose. Set the stage a little bit. First, I think it's really important to kind of revisit what it means to be a mammal. I think when we think about land mammals, it kind of comes easier, but when we think about marine mammals, they share the same traits. But if you guys want to think about that and then shout them out as they come to you, what you all believe that to be. What was that?
Live birth.
Yeah, live birth is one of them. Live birth and being able to nurse their young with milk. That's one. We have 3 more.
Warm
Hair.
Yeah, hair is one that I think is really cool because we don't usually think about that with marine mammals. Like a whale take, where do you think the hair is on a whale?
Teeth.
Teeth? Well, yeah, the baleen is different. It's made of the same stuff as hair, but actually when whales are born, they have little bits of hair on their nostril, or on their rostrum it's called, which is kind of like their nose area. And then as they mature, a lot of times the hair goes away. So to be a mammal, you have to have hair on your body at some point in time. It doesn't have to be throughout the life. So a lot of whales and dolphins and porpoises lose the hair later on. So we have hair, we have live young, a good kind of general outline of some of the common mammals that we see, but it also does not have all of them. There's a few that I left out due to space and whatnot. And it's a very general setting to help you kind of identify. To start off though, I'd like to talk about our cetaceans. And cetaceans is really referring to whales. It actually comes from the Latin word that means whale. And so those are our whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And they fall under 2 different categories you'll see on those sheets. There's the toothed whales, and then there's the baleen whales. And I think I put kind of the Latin name in there as well, but I do not know how to say it, so I'm not going to attempt it. And then we talked a little bit yesterday about kind of what separates a whale and a dolphin. So all dolphins and porpoises are actually whales. They just fall under that category of toothed whales. So they're they have their own families underneath that category, but they all can be classified as a cetacean. And so to start out, I'd like to kind of go over the differences between a dolphin and a porpoise. And here we have both of them in the Salish Sea. So this is a very kind of general, what is generally accepted as differences, but it may not be true for all dolphins and porpoises. But to start, porpoises generally have a triangular shaped dorsal fin. That can be a really good factor to, if you see it see something coming out of the water really quickly and you see a triangular shaped dorsal fin, that's a good indicator that it may be a porpoise. And dolphins have a much more curved dorsal fin. So you kind of think of your standard bottlenose dolphin and how curved that fin is. That's a good indicator of that. They also, porpoises tend to be a little bit smaller and they have a much stouter body. They tend to be a little bit rounder, which I think is really fascinating because you look at that Dall's porpoise and it's it has a very round body, as you can see in the picture, but it's actually one of the fastest swimmers that we have. And it has sometimes you can see a rooster tail following it because it's swimming so fast. Generally, they're a little bit more. You feel? Cool. Well, hopefully it'll come back up. But porpoises are generally a little bit more shy than dolphins. Dolphins tend to be very social, and they'll like to ride the bow waves of boats. And actually, the Dall's porpoise will do that as well. But harbor porpoises tend to not bow ride at all. And dolphins have a very prominent beak for the most part, where porpoises have a much rounder head there. You can tell in the pictures. And then one of the main factors is that they're teeth shaped. Dolphins have a very conical, sharp teeth that they have, and then porpoises they describe it as a spade shaped teeth. And when you see it in a picture, it's a much rounder top on the teeth there. Even though I find it interesting that they eat a very similar diet, they both have herring and squids and small fish, but they have very different mouths in that sense. Next kind of family that we're going to go into is pinnipeds, and those are our seals and sea lions. And we saw a seal in here a little while ago, and actually those that have binoculars, if you do want, you can look out, and on the little spit out there, or we can do it after this lesson, there's actually, you can see these big dark worm looking creatures. Those are a lot of seals that are hanging out on that island way out there. So hopefully they'll come in and visit us a little more, and we can talk about them. Did you see one? You can see it. You can see all of them. You don't even need binoculars. Barely. So seals versus sea lions and the differences between the two. So here, like I put on the sheet, we have harbor seals mainly, and those are like the most common marine mammal that we see in the Salish Sea. And then we also have two different types of sea lions, and we also have northern elephant seals occasionally. I didn't put it on the sheet because they're much less common. But then we have two different types of sea lions on there as well. And some of the differences for the two are seals have holes for ears rather than flaps. So seals, they just have holes, and that's what they're using to receive their sound, whereas sea lions have the little ear flaps that you can see, especially if you get like a close-up of their face, you'll be able to see little ear flaps. And I think one of the easiest ways to tell a difference when they're on land is that seals have much smaller little flippers, and they can't rotate their flippers, so they just kind of move around like this and wiggle around. Whereas sea lions, they can rotate their flippers out, and so you'll see them actually walking around, and they can move much more gracefully on the ground, more than I can do right now. But they're much more graceful. Another good sign is seals are much less vocal than sea lions. Sometimes you'll hear pups, and I think I put it on the sheet, they'll have kind of like a maw call that they'll do to their mothers. But for the most part, seals are very quiet creatures. Whereas sea lions, when you hear those big loud barks, that sounds like a big, like mean, angry dog barking. Those are sea lions, and specifically those are California sea lions. Our stellar sea lions, they also make noise, but it's much more, it's described as like a lion-like roar, if you can imagine that. So if you hear what you think is a lion or a mean dog, it's probably a sea lion that is barking at you. But both seals and sea lions, they really enjoy lounging on the land. That's what they do. They'll hang out and just kind of sunbathe or digest their food. And so I believe it's really important that you may come across them on land, especially seal pups that are lying on the rocks. And human encroachment can be a really big stress to seal pup mothers and sea lion mothers. And so it's important to give them at least like 200 feet and not get near them, because even just being around them can really stress out the mothers, and they'll actually just abandon their pups altogether. So that's actually protected under the Marine Mammal Act, which was established in 1972, and it was kind of a response that certain species and populations were in danger from humans and human contact. And so the Marine Mammal Act actually protects all marine mammals in U.S. waters from being hunted, killed, or harassed. And there can be some exceptions to that, like sometimes scientists will get certain permits that allow them to get a marine mammal for scientific use, or some Native American tribes will have different agreements that can allow them to harvest different marine mammals that I'll go into in a little bit later. Directly killing marine mammals, we're still having extreme effects on their health. So now I'd like to kind of shift into a little bit of a game that we're going to play, and it's addressing this thing called bioaccumulation and biomagnification. So bioaccumulation refers to the ability for a lot of dangerous toxins to accumulate on the sea floor and be taken in by organisms. So are you guys all ready to kind of stand up and run around a little bit? Cool. If you notice on your sheets of paper in the upper, I believe it was the upper right-hand corner, there's one that I messed up on and it's actually going to be on the back, but the upper right-hand corner of the front, there's going to be a letter. And if you have the letter P, will you raise your hand or come up to the front here? Plankton play an important role in this, our whole marine ecosystem, because they're what is absorbing all these toxins on like a basis level. So those rocks that I gave everybody, those kind of represent the toxins that are in our oceans. They're also known as POPs, which are persistent organic pollutants. So that kind of refers to all the chemicals that go into our waters, and they don't go away. They're not able to be metabolized by different marine mammals and whatnot, so they kind of stay in our system. And next, everybody with the letter F, could you please stand up? Fish, also squids, herrings, everything. They are going to try to catch the phytoplankton, and then when they catch you, they are going to take the rock from you, and then the phytoplankton, you can go back and sit down. You are allowed to run. Do so in a very careful manner.
There's
Please
a rock
no one
right
get
there.
home. Everybody go!
I've been
Toxins are, a lot of them are like PCBs, which are polychlorinated biophenols, and they've been noted to be endocrine disruptors, and that really plays into like regulating different hormones and metabolisms, and it really plays into a reproductive system. So it's been associated with a lot of issues in reproductive systems and everything along those lines. And then, as Rose kind of just pointed out, what's another apex predator that we have? Humans, us, right? Because we're eating a lot of these other marine mammals and sea creatures, and so all these toxins that we're putting into the environment, they're also in turn harming ourselves. And I think this really comes into play when we think about different social justice issues, because a lot of times there's many different indigenous peoples that still rely heavily on marine ecosystems for their food sources and sustenance, and these POPs have like greatly percolated into our food systems, and then in turn are just kind of hurting ourselves. Yes, Rose?
I've heard that human breast milk is the most toxic breast milk for animals.
Interesting.
Can you say that again?
I've heard, I don't remember where I heard this, but I've heard that human breast milk is the most toxic
Oh, yeah.
breast milk and
It's
has the
where
most,
it's accumulated.
yeah, of all organisms.
What's the first milk called? The
What?
colostrum?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's being affected like on marine mammals of all scales, right? Because they're like feeding their youth off their own milk, and so then that keeps these different toxins in the system. And like I said, most of these toxins are very lipophilic, so they like to be stored in the fat, and that's why they're really not able to be metabolized, and they just stay in our systems, and they continue to accumulate at really high levels the further we get up in the food chain. So just kind of to wrap up, I want to touch on how it's important we need to recognize what we're putting into our oceans, and especially in the form of waste disposal. Like, it's easy to think that, oh, if you throw it in the water, it's just going to dilute and not be affected, but really that stuff accumulates, and that like plays into play when we think about fertilizers and a lot of different chemicals, like they build up in our oceans. So I think on those sheets I even kind of put some little pointers on how we can really work to take care of our oceans and help protect our marine mammals.